You're good to go, Alderman, whenever you're ready.
Okay. Matt, should we wait for Tiffany or you want to move?
Let me send her a text right now. I'm not sure if she was planning to join, but I think we can go ahead and get started
All right,
whenever
so
you're
we'll
ready,
get
Alderman.
started. Um, Good evening, everybody. Thank you for coming to the Town Hall, Third Ward Town Hall on shared housing. The reason I wanted to have this meeting is because over the summer, there's been a couple of incidents that created some questions about shared housing. What is it? How many platforms there are? How does the city license them? One of the incidents occurred on 14th and Wabash, which was an alleged hostage situation in a Sonder unit. And then another one occurred on South Indiana, with an illegal Airbnb that was having unauthorized parties. And so I thought it would be a good town hall topic to have someone from the Department of Business Affairs and Consumer Protection to come to us this evening to give us some information on shared housing and how the city licenses and administers this new social platform. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce everyone to Matt Ali, who is a Deputy Commissioner in the Department of Business Affairs and Consumer Protection. And we also have with us Tiffany Brooks, who is an Assistant Commissioner with the Department of Business Affairs and Community Consumer Protection, better known as BACP. So we'll take a presentation first. I encourage people to put your questions in the chat box and we will go through them one at a time. Matt, it's on you.
Thank you, Alderman, and hello, everyone. I'm going to share my screen here to run through a brief PowerPoint. Looks like that. Can folks see that screen?
Yes, I can see it.
Okay, great. All right. Okay. So thanks again for joining this evening to talk about shared housing and vacation rentals. Just a quick overview of what I will talk about. So I'll give a general overview of the city's approach to regulating shared housing. This does go back to 2016. Then touch upon the reform ordinance that City Council just passed back in September, and we'll overview the enhancements that has made and what that will look like moving forward. And then to the Alderman's point at the outset around responding to some problematic incidents, wanted to provide what I've called some community enforcement options, various ways based upon control of the property that could prove helpful to seek to regulate this type of activity within a specific community. And then certainly wanted to allow ample time for questions. So I will try to get through this fairly quickly. As I said, the city of Chicago passed its first shared housing ordinance back in 2016. And it was one of the first to do so in the country. And it was unique in that it was the first city that was able to require and obtain host data from the shared housing platforms. There had been similar regulatory efforts that basically indicated for how long activity could take place or where it could take place here. Chicago was the first where we were actually going to get data on who the hosts were, where and where they were located. And so it was certainly unique in that instance. However, since 2016, over the past 3.5 years, this industry has changed significantly. And other municipalities have also followed suit. They've similarly layered in fairly aggressive regulatory schemes. And what we've identified is through the course of litigation and municipalities that have been successful with certain claims, we we identified shortcomings and certainly felt that we had good legal footing to put forth reforms to our ordinance that we would be confident would be upheld in court in the event of a legal challenge. So top of mind, the three most prevalent issues that we felt the need to reform through this effort. The system was initially set up as a pass-through system, and so hosts would actually apply with Airbnb or HomeAway, and those companies twice a month would sync their data with the city of Chicago. We found that was problematic in that we were getting a lot of pseudonyms and just the data wasn't always being formatted properly as to how someone would identify a unit, whether it's a number or apartment or a unit number, things of that nature that caused a lot of system communication issues. And so we instead, much like all of our other business licenses throughout the city, we wanted to make the Department of Business Affairs the point of intake for those host registrations. Unique to this activity, given that the shared housing industry was already established, and at the time of the ordinance in 2016, there were already 5,000 hosts throughout the city. We couldn't necessarily just put a blanket on that activity and shut it down while we built out our system. And so we had to build in a slow on ramp in allowing hosts to continue to participate in this activity while their registration application was pending before the department. And after 3 years, that we've outlived that the usefulness of that provision, and instead that created a lot of harmful disincentives for hosts to appeal or drag out appeals unnecessarily. And so we wanted to remove that. And then lastly, we felt the need for enhanced enforcement authorities to combat problematic party units. So I will go over generally what the reform ordinance did. This was the result of numerous discussions with City Council through the licensing committee and other critical Alderman Dowell certainly being one, where we were able to identify a number of enhancements that could be made. Specifically here in the enforcement authority, we now require a minimum rental period of two consecutive days. We found that of the units that we were responding to, there was an overwhelming variable was that these were single night reservations. Thinking that if you're only using it for a night, maybe that is a out of towner for one night on a business trip. But our experience was that those are more likely to prove to be problematic party units. And so we are now requiring for shared housing activity a minimum two night rental. Hotels can still be for one night. Bed and breakfast can still be for one night, but a shared housing unit or a vacation rental unit needs to be for a minimum of two. We've also strengthened the prohibition on excessive loud noises and vibrations from within the unit to include beyond the unit itself. In a multi-unit building, we had instances where partygoers would be up on the rooftop causing disturbances, and that wasn't technically the unit per se, and so needed to broaden some definitions. And we also made more clear what would be an occupancy limit. Before, in working with the building department, it was deemed to be so many persons per square footage, and that proved to be fairly unworkable for enforcement officials in the field. And so now it's a far more clear cut that you have 2 adults per sleeping room per unit. And so we would know right away what the legal occupancy should be. And that's going to be a very strong provision when we do go after what could potentially be a party house. You'll notice one of the distinctions between what is a shared housing unit or a vacation rental unit and what then becomes a hotel is there's a line between up to 6 sleeping rooms and then 7 plus. And so a hotel, by definition, is when you have 7 or more sleeping rooms. And so therefore, I mentioned that. So therefore, a shared housing unit should have no more than 6 sleeping rooms, and so therefore no more than 12 adults in that unit at any given time. If that occupancy is exceeded, that's a violation and can lead to immediate enforcement. We've increased the fine ranges. and provided for a flat fee if a host fails to remove their units after they've been deemed ineligible. And then we've also increased the path to suspend or revoke a license. Or I'm sorry, in this instance, it would be a registration. And that fits into two buckets. We only need one instance of an egregious condition, which could be over occupancy, could be anything more problematic, like the alderman mentioned at the Sonder unit, could lead to, for a single instance, immediate revocation or suspension of that registration. But we need to go through a hearing process. Alternatively, we would only need two incidents of any objectionable or illegal activity, which is a lesser threshold to meet. Those thresholds were 2 and 3 before, and so now we've lowered them to 1 and 2. Talking about some of the system flow issues very briefly, this is not so much a concern for constituents, but we are going to place BACP as the intake for shared housing applications. They'll apply directly with us. We're imposing a registration fee on the applicants as well, which will allow for us to bolster our enforcement resources that we can dedicate. And we're going to do a debt check on these individuals as well for any shared housing violations, which wasn't previously the case. We're going to prohibit them from being able to participate in this activity while they are pending. As I mentioned, that was one of the problems that we ran into when folks could unnecessarily, frivolously appeal and drag that appeal out. They will now need their registration issued in order for them to be able to conduct shared housing activity. And from a licensing perspective, we are trying to, we've been approached by smaller companies that found the licensing fee structure to be too much of a hurdle. They only had less than 50 units. You're seeing niche markets being created that are being tailored to certain types of experiences or clients. And so we wanted to allow them the possibility. So based on the overall unit count that they would be offering in the city, they now have a possibility to come into licensing compliance. And then I want to just touch on some of the community enforcement options. There are what are called restricted residential zones. And these are similar to a vote drive, if you're familiar with that, but it's the legal voters of any precinct within a ward that contains residentially zoned property. So that's going to be anywhere from RS1 up to RM5. That's a revision that we made. It used to just be RS1 through RS3. We've now broadened it to include higher density residential zoning. Legal voters can petition their local alderman to introduce an ordinance to establish that precinct as a restricted residential zone. The petitions need 25% of registered voters. The ordinance then needs to go through city council, and that would be in effect for a period of 4 years. After the 4 years, it then could be renewed through a second or third appeal process. Or, I'm sorry, petition process. Alternatively, there's the prohibited buildings list. So this is a list that we maintain that if the building ownership, if it's an apartment building, it could be the owner of that building. If it's a condo building, it could be the homeowners association. Through either rental agreements or formal modification of their bylaws, can prohibit this activity in that building. There's a form that building would need to submit to BACP. We review it and then maintain it. And then any time a new application comes through the system, it's one of the criteria that application would be checked against, and any application coming in for a unit within that building would be denied due to its location on the prohibited buildings list. BACP does have a complaint form as well that's utilized for vacation rental, bed and breakfast, or shared housing. On the next slide, I'll show you where you can locate it and then where you submit it to. This is just a screenshot of the top of the document, but essentially it does need the witnesses information. So if it's a neighboring property that you're witnessing, obviously you would fill this out with your name, email, and phone. information on the address that's problematic, and then there is a section for narrative as to what's been experienced or witnessed, and then certainly any photos or any other documented evidence is going to be helpful for us to verify and to move forward. The complaint form can be located on the City of Chicago's website, and I can provide these links to the Alderman's office if they wanted to distribute as well, and then can be submitted via email, or there's also at the end of the form information on it can be faxed over or mailed in as well. So multiple ways in which that can be submitted. And then lastly, there's certainly 311 and 911. And based upon the severity of the incident would determine which should be the appropriate path. But I think, as I often say, making those calls is certainly helpful because it creates a record. It creates a record that folks had called about that instance. It creates a log for calls for service at any given location, which certainly can be helpful as we look at a unit and see. We often will look at the calls for service in that area to see how problematic that location may be. And the last thing I would note is if you were needing to call 311 or 911 to complain about a shared housing unit or a vacation rental unit, to please indicate during the course of that call that you are calling in response to likely shared housing activity. That way we have that in the report that's searchable. We can work through OEMC or police to obtain a list of to obtain a report of calls made for this type of activity, and it similarly allows us to track it. So documenting those incidents is always going to be beneficial for us as we learn of these problematic units and deem, going back to the threshold issues, when would BACP have sufficient bases to proceed to a disciplinary case? I believe that should be my last slide. I wanted to buzz through that quickly to allow ample time for questions and comments.
Thank you, Matt. Before we take any questions, I saw the Commissioner of the Department of Business Affairs and Consumer Protection step in the room, and I wanted to give her an opportunity to speak to our constituents, and that's Commissioner Rosa Escarino.
Hi, Alderman, thank you so much. And everybody, my name is Rosa Escareno. I'm the Commissioner of the Department. Matt Ali oversees our licensing division, but I'm extremely glad to be before you because I know that there are questions that you and the community have. We work extremely closely with the Alderman, who is also the chairman of the budget, and we know how busy she is these days. But we work very closely with her as she brings all the community concerns to our department, and certainly work with her to try to resolve many of them. So I'm happy to be here, and thank you all for allowing us an opportunity to speak with you. And Matt, as well as Tiffany from the team who's also on here, we're more than happy to answer any other questions that you may have. But again, thank you to the Alderman. I know that she is extremely active and is constantly calling us, making sure that we're staying on top of the issues that the constituents are bringing. So we're here to answer any questions that you guys may have. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. I don't see any questions related to the topic in the chat box. There's one question that is, why is it so difficult to get through to BACP via the phone? That's from Tanya Petty. So if somebody wants to take that, Tiffany or Commissioner?
Sure. Alderman, this is Tiffany Brooks from BACP. Thank you for the question this evening. Ms. Petty, I just want to let you know that as of right now, per the mayor's executive order, the city government employees are currently working remotely. There are departments who are open, but we work in shifts, those of us who come into City Hall, and we are available Monday through Friday at all times via email. And I will say that the BACP offices are usually open on business days from Monday through Friday, 8:30 a.m. until 4:30 p.m. However, the BACP employees, I know they do check their emails very regularly because we often send emails throughout the night. But if you send an email, I'm sure someone will be able to get back to you within a 24-hour time period if you have questions or concerns.
Thank you very much, Tiffany. James, can you unmute the commissioner, please? All right, we do have a question. Who is this? Oh, this is from, okay, this is from Patrick Shaughnessy. He says, I believe these party houses are a serious blemish on a neighborhood and can cause a significant decrease in the quality of life. No resident should have to be burdened with excessive noise. I guess pre-COVID, he and his wife hosted 45 times over the last 3 years and never had noisy or problematic guests. We have only a 2-bedroom, 1-bath unit and limit the total number of guests at any one time to 2 total guests. We are always on site and never absent when we hosted guests. I do not feel these on-site hosts like us are the problem. However, we get lumped in with the bad apples. How do hosts like us not get penalized? We are offering an extra bedroom that would not go on the rental market anyway. We do not wish to be labeled as bad neighbors.
So I just wanted to make a couple of comments. One, you can also, regarding the call, we have a 74GO-BIZ number. And if you take the number and you call 74GO-BIZ, and we can give you the actual numeric number, I just can't think of it right now. But we have operators throughout the day that actually do answer that call. But I think Tiffany indicated email is the best. To the question about these, the events and their parties, we do agree. Right now, under COVID, we have stood up an enforcement team that is a task force made up of BACP, the police department, the fire department, the buildings department, who are addressing the party type events. Events that operate like a commercial type event. So somebody's charging, somebody is inviting via charging at the door, and it's maybe charging liquor once you get to the location. That is operating like an event. And so if that is put on a task force radar, we go to the premise, even if it is a home, then we can write citations for those types of events and or parties, like as though they were operating a business. Now, we do understand that there are many individuals that just hold parties in their homes. The Department of Business Affairs and Consumer Protection, our enforcement team does not have the authority to enter a private residence. But we do work very closely with the police department so that if there are these house parties that are not part of a shared housing or in a hotel or a commercial activity, it is the police department that actually has the primary authority of entering a private residence. Those issues should be reported to 911, and or if you have an individual that holds those kinds of events, you can also report them to 311 in the event that we want to put them on our radar. So I guess to the question of an event in a private residence, it is a tricky thing. Most important, when there is a host that is operating through a platform, the most important thing for us to receive, whether you call 911 or 311, is the unit number, the floor number, because it is only through that very specific address that we can actually verify whether a host has a registration on a platform. But like the individual just stated, there are many individuals that just have house parties that have nothing to do with a registered unit. So, but we're happy to take the complaints, and then we're happy to work with police if those are issues that are not related to a host or a commercial activity.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner. We have a question from Craig Yarborough. What kinds of hybrid businesses are entering into the shared housing space? This was mentioned earlier.
Well, I think the comment, this is Matthew Alley again, was, well, it wasn't so much a hybrid, but rather that there were smaller companies that were tailored to more niche markets. And so it would still be deemed shared housing activity. We would definitionally still treat it the same. It was just that, you know, they weren't coming in with thousands of units like the larger platforms have. They were coming in with, you know, less than 100. There was a company that was promoting itself to European travelers from abroad. Another company that was tailoring it more to like a business. I'm trying to blank on, but business executives traveling, and so they just had a smaller unit count, and therefore the licensing fee at the time, when it was regardless of number of units, it was $10,000 to become licensed, was cost prohibitive, and so we created a tiered system to allow smaller platforms or companies to seek licensing and come into compliance.
Okay, thank you, Matt Ali. A question from Todd Carr. Is Airbnb and the other booking sites cooperating with these new restrictions?
So I would say that yes, they are. We were reaching out to the companies at the outset to discuss what we identified as the issues. They knew where the city was looking to go, and you know they took issue with the 2-night prohibition, but at the same time recognized that was the direction in which the city was headed, and so implemented the technology necessary to layer in that prohibition. That restriction is on the host, but Airbnb is frankly being a good partner in enabling the technology to prohibit that one-night option at all. And so that being said, you know, a lot of these things are still coming due. All the enforcement elements that were laid out go into effect in a couple days based upon passage and publication of the ordinance. Those will go into effect on October 17th. The other system flow issues that will similarly require assistance or coordination with the platforms due to the build out that technology will require. Those don't go into effect until April 1st of next year. So, and then lastly, I would add that you know, anytime that we identify a problematic unit where we've responded to a problematic incidence of large gatherings or violence or drugs or any of these concerning elements, the companies don't want those hosts affiliated with their platforms either, and so it often leads to a two-prong effort. The companies will take those units down immediately to remove those hosts from being able to participate. And then BACP, our process takes much longer. We need to gather the reports. We need to gather the evidence. We need to initiate a case and have that case go through a hearing process. And so our formal revocation process does take some time, but it's really the back end cleanup to what's often the very proactive efforts of these platforms to remove these problematic hosts at the outset.
Okay, Matthew, I'm going to ask you to put your video back on for the next. Okay, so
Sure.
a question came up about, and we do have someone here. From Craig Yarborough, are party houses an issue in the 3rd Ward? I wouldn't say it's a high issue. I mean, it's not an issue that is happens a lot. I would say I have a few locations in the ward where I have had issues with unauthorized parties, and those have turned out to be shared housing or hotel or vacation rental locations. Another question comes up related to the building at 1419 Wabash, which is a Sonder location. Is this a building that should be an apartment building or a hotel? Can you speak to how those are licensed? Matt?
Sure, sure. So 1419 South Wabash, I believe, is what's technically deemed a mixed-use building. It's large enough that it allows retail or commercial activity on the ground floor, and then allows a mix of commercial and residential activity above that. And so, so technically, Sonder does hold a hotel license for that premises, and they satisfy all the elements. They have over the 7 units. The underlying zoning allows for a hotel use at that property, but I think it's not the hotel that we all think of when we envision a Marriott or whatever it may be. It's a newer version of a hotel, but nonetheless, that is the appropriate licensing structure. They would not be eligible to have anything other than that, given the number of units that they're looking to operate. And so, Sonder did come through the process as part of our application review. We would verify that the zoning permits this activity. We would verify that they have all requisite insurance. Hotels are inspected by various departments, and ultimately they were issued a hotel license for the units in that building. And so I guess the larger answer to the question would be that it's a type of building that allows for mixed uses, where it could be both commercial, hotel, and purely residential, all mixed together.
Okay, Commissioner Commissioner, are you able to unmute yourself now?
Thank you. And I just don't want to keep bothering you guys. I'll just leave it alone. But thank you.
Oh, I thought you wanted to add on to that.
Earlier I did, and I just left it alone.
Okay. All right. So, and to the Tammy, yes, I have met with the owner of the building about how, and with Sonder, about how they've been conducting business, and I'm satisfied with the response and the changes that they are contemplating. Okay, I have a question from Craig Yarborough, who says that, where are you? Craig, what happened to your question? He says people are looking to deceive the hosts and have parties. Occasionally, they may lie well enough to fool a host. If this happens, will this factor be considered by BACP?
Well, I mean, what I can say is that the host, it is the responsibility of the host to monitor the individuals that they are allowing to use their location. If there is a party there, person says it's only me and my family, and then you have 50 friends having a party, it is still the responsibility of the host to monitor that. If those become issues, then the host is responsible. This is why it's important that the host stay on top of the individuals that they're renting out to, that they are bringing into their home. The city will hold the host responsible for those issues.
Okay. Okay, and he agrees with you, Commissioner. He says that's an important point you raised, and hosts must do their own due diligence. We hosts bear responsibility to vet our guests. He agrees 100% with you. Well, I don't see any other questions here, and I don't like to hold people longer than is necessary. So what I would like to do is introduce Tammy Ike, who is from Airbnb, who approached me about some new programs that they're offering. So I'm going to ask James to share the screen, unmute Tammy. And Tammy, we're going to give you a few minutes to talk about your new programs at Airbnb. And while she's getting ready, there is a question. Will hosts be limited to a certain number of rooms, of room nights?
Matt, do you want to answer that?
So the only limits that would come into play is a shared housing unit by definition can be no more than 6 sleeping rooms. If you're more than 6, then you simply wouldn't qualify as a shared housing unit. And the limitation that is new, that definition remains unchanged. The new element that this question may be speaking to is that the minimum rental is a 2-night rental. That being said, there is no cap on the number of the amount of activity. And so there would be no limit to how many reservations a host could make throughout the course of a year, as long as they were compliant with the minimum reservations.
Okay, thank you. And I had the wrong Tammy. So I'm going to ask James to just share the screen on that one item. And I think for my constituents here, the only thing that I want you to know is that Airbnb has a neighborhood support line, which you can also call. It's a 24/7 hotline that works anywhere in the United States. You can speak to somebody live about an incident. And that number is in the box here, which is 855-635-7754. As you can see on part 2, they say that as of August, they have banned all parties and gatherings, capping occupancy at a maximum of 16 guests in all listings. They have a policy now of restricting guests under the age of 25. And they have a Chicago safety initiative where they work with critical agencies to prevent parties which threaten public health and violate user policies established by the city. So I just want to make sure you have this information. I'll be getting this out to you probably in our next newsletter. And I want to thank Matt Ali and Tiffany Brooks and Commissioner Escarino for your time this evening. Commissioner, will you close us out and then we'll say goodnight?
Yes, actually, and if I can just make one point of clarification, Alderman, just in terms of the latest updates to the ordinance indicates that a dwelling or a host cannot have more than 12 individuals. Right, Matt? It's 12, not
two adults per sleeping room, but that doesn't account for any children. And so the way in which that you may run into a combination of the two would be seemingly Airbnb would take into account any kids in attendance, but certainly we would have a lower threshold for overall adults in a unit. We would limit that to no more than 12.
Right. And I just wanted to make that clarification, Alderman, because I think the policy of Airbnb, that number goes higher. And certainly if there's children, that's fine. But if they're all adults, they're actually we're much more conservative in the number of adults that could be in any shared housing unit.
And that also presumes that it's that the unit has 6 sleeping rooms, which is feasible, but is probably uncommon. And so the maximum adult count is likely to be, less than that based upon, if it's a 3-bedroom unit, then you're talking about 6 adults.
Right. So that's
So when in doubt, check with the Department of Business Affairs. That's what I say.
and
You have a great team, Commissioner. Tiffany and Matt are top of the line, and we really appreciate you taking time this evening. It's very informative.
Thank you. And the only other comment I would make is that we certainly want you to call that hotline number by Airbnb if there are just basic issues, but where you have issues that you want to make sure the city is made aware of, we would ask you that you still report those to 311. So you can certainly call them, but in order for us to have a record, just like Matt indicated earlier, if there's just excessive noise or excessive parties, those we still need to hear from them, because while we can share information with Airbnb, we want to make sure we're controlling that information. So just an additional point of clarification. But Alderman, to you and your team, thank you so much. Let us know how we can continue to be of additional help and assistance. We are going to get information out via social media, as well as to the those that are registered hosts on the new guidelines that are going into effect in October, as well as what's coming in March. So let us know when you want us to continue to engage with the community. We're more than happy to do it. And thank you, Alderman, for being a great partner.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. And thank you all for showing up tonight. Have a nice evening. Goodbye, everyone.
Thanks, Alderman.
Thank you.
Thank you all.